Hello, this is Chiak. We are back with Volume 1 of Death Stranding, based on production by Hideo Kojima and novelized by Hitori Nojima, translated by Carley Radford. Also, apparently, there's going to be a Death Stranding too. A teaser trailer for me dropped yesterday before this live stream is going. And yeah, to say I'm surprised and rather happy I'm reading this book so I can remind myself exactly what happened in the first game. Not to say that I haven't played it, but either way, I am hoping to get through all of chapter episode 6 today. I thought I might have to split this up, but I might be able to read it. It depends. We'll see. We will see. Either way, sorry, I'm looking. There's my bookmark. So, either way, let's get started. Episode 6 Mama. A cramp like pain shot through her chest. Mama was holding a baby that had been crying for some time now as she put her breast to its mouth. The tension and pain in her breast lessened, but the little girl who normally calmed down once she started suckling would not stop crying, and the ache in the depths of her breast lingered. Her body was responding to the unstable fluctuations in chiral density. They had a similar effect on the body to temperature and pressure variations. Ever since the baby had been born, her body had changed. Her sensitivity and abilities as someone with dooms became far more enhanced, and now they were telling her that something was wrong. The changes in chiral density here over the past few hours could not be overlooked. It was continuously fluctuating up and down. She had sent a warning to Owen in South Knot City and urged him to warn Sam at the distribution center. After that, the chiral density had climbed rapidly and interrupted communications. Mama's daughter continued to cry. She was crying like she was afraid, and that made Mama afraid too. She checked the values on the monitor, and her fear turned into curiosity. The chiral density had been going up and up, but now it was back to normal. It had fallen so suddenly. It had fallen so suddenly that it was like someone had just switched it off. It was unbelievable. It hadn't even been 1 minute since she had lost contact with Sam. So she's not crying because of the chiral density? Mama wondered if there was something wrong with the equipment. She might have to get maintenance on it later. It might have been an issue with the sensors that made the vital signs coming from Sam's cufflinks cut out for a second. Mama felt frustrated that she couldn't go outside. She tried calling Sam's cufflinks once again. "Sam, do you read me?" She called out. "Yeah. Where am I?" The sound quality was clear, but Sam's voice sounded awfully tired on the other end. It wasn't far between Sam's position and the lab, and he should still have been close to South Knot City. It wasn't far between Sam's position and the lab, and he should still have been close to the South Knot City distribution center. His reply didn't make any sense. "What happened to me? I got caught in the storm and I was in a war zone." Did we have our wires crossed? Maybe the chiral density was still high. Maybe she was speaking to someone who happened to sound just like Sam. "You been daydreaming, Sam? Comms are only down for what? Comms are only down for a second." "No, it was much longer than that." Sam sounded irritated. He wasn't making sense, and that worried Mama. "There was this soldier. He tried taking my BB." "Sam, it's been less than a minute since we last spoke." "That can't be right. I was there for 4 hours. It felt like." He must just be tired. She wasn't going to tell him so, but she kept her mouth shut in the end. Sam did sound like he was completely exhausted. Maybe she was the one who was tired and getting things wrong. Never mind. Coming to you. Mama sighed and turned toward her desk. Luckily, this lab was in an area that was covered by the chiral network that used South Knot City as a node. HQ would most likely hold a file on Sam's background that she could request. If she could analyze it, she might find out which battlefield he was talking about. After ending the confusing codec call with Mama, Sam walked for a while until a crumbling bridge came into view. It was the ruins of a bridge that had fallen victim to the simultaneous terrorist attacks that had been made against South Knot City. The data said the bridge had originally been protected as a monument. Sam thought back to the briefing he had received from Die Hardman just before he set out for South Knot. It was a part of a highway that had managed to escape destruction in the period following the Death Stranding, and had been repaired and preserved as a symbol of revival. It was also very close to South Knot City, and the small colony that had formed around it. The heart of this colony was a former large-scale distribution warehouse that had been built right next to the road. The volunteers would one day go on to form Fragile Express, had evacuated goods there that had been left behind in other locations, forming the source of the colony. Mama had first been attracted there by the superconductive large-scale accelerator that had once been operated there, and all the materials, equipment, and data that had been extracted and preserved from the related facilities to go with it. She had originally been a member of Bridges 1 and volunteered to stay behind. According to Die Hardman, one of the main reasons for this was because of the accelerator's principal purpose, which was to observe Higgs particles. It was a treasure trove to a researcher like Mama. But there was no longer a trace of any of that data left. All that was left now was a pile of concrete wreckage punctuated by the ends of twisted steel bars. It couldn't even be called a temporary shelter. It was nothing more than the shell of what it once was. Sam couldn't believe that Mama would live somewhere like that, but no matter how many times he checked and rechecked the map, Mama's lab was close. He couldn't see anywhere that looked like it could be an entrance, though. As he wandered around the perimeter, a security sensor reacted to him. He wasn't carrying any cargo, but it seemed to have sensed the ID strand around his waist and permitted him entry. A dull sound emanated from a part of the wall that was covered in brushed panels as it opened. The BB grumbled as Sam took a step toward it. "What is it?" "It's okay," Sam soothed as he stepped into the murky hallway beyond. The door closed and the hallway became even darker. A low buzzing echoed around the room, indicating that some equipment was up and running nearby. The temperature dropped artificially as if countering the heat of the machinery. Sam's breath hung white in the air. The BB began to cry in a way that seemed a little more fearful than before. The Odra deck activated and opened and closed nervously as it scanned the surroundings. He was trapped. This couldn't be Mama's lab. His frozen breath lingered in the air. He had to go back, but the BB protested. As soon as Sam tried to turn on his heel, the BB cried out loudly as if it was trying to tell him something. It may have been afraid, but the BB wanted Sam to keep going on. Sam did as he was told. As he exited the hallway, Sam found himself in a wide space. He was surrounded by industrial machines, motorbikes, and other vehicles. He heard a clinking sound from above. It was a mobile. Plates in the shape of shells, hearts, whales, and dolphins were precariously balanced above him. The BB saw it and stopped crying, but the Odra deck was still in warning mode. As the mobile rattled, the BB laughed. Sam saw a BB softly floating near the Sam saw a BB softly floating near the large crack that ran along the ceiling. It was dead. Sam instinctively clapped a hand to his mouth. The baby was a BT. Don't worry, Sam. She doesn't bite. It was Mama's voice. Glad you made it. Like some sort of pantomime, Mama reached out both arms wide into the air and embraced the baby. The minute particles clumped together in her arms. She began to rock it with a smile on her face. She's hungry. She was speaking to the baby rather than to Sam. She threw an apologetic look at Sam and then eventually raised her arms back toward the ceiling. The mass of particles in her arms dissolved into the air, but Sam could see a cord made of the same particles stretching out from her abdomen. What the? Mama ignored Sam and said, There, she's down. Mama had her hand to her chest and looked a little embarrassed. Even though she can't drink it, my body keeps making it. Going through the motions really helps with the soreness, though. Mama glanced at Sam's chest and laughed. The BB was stirring inside the pod. She's my daughter, and I'm her mama. Nice to meet you, Sam. Mama held out her right hand, but quickly snatched it back as she suddenly remembered Sam's aphenphos... I add this word. Aphenphosmophobia? Aphenphosmophobia. One of the rings of the cufflink she had equipped on her arms was dangling down. You can see it, right? You're hooked up. The umbilical cord of particles climbed upward and upward from Mama's abdomen. Sorry, who was speaking there? Actually, I have no idea if it's Sam talking or Mama talking that sentence. You can see it, right? You're hooked up. The umbilical cord of particles climbed upward and upward from Mama's abdomen. It's okay. She's only connected to me. She's not like the other BTs. She's not after the living. The BB grizzled as if it understood the meaning of Mama's words and was trying to say something back, and the Odradect moved slightly and pointed toward the ceiling in response. Now you know why I can't leave. The walls were collapsing in on themselves, and the roof was scored with enormous cracks. It hadn't been repaired at all. Much like the exterior, traces of past acts of terror could be seen all over the place. While the room was filled with state-of-the-art machinery, there was also broken medical equipment and hospital beds stashed in the corners. Mama turned to her desk that was pushed up along the wall. So, about the supercell. She sighed at the fidgety Odradek. Do you think the grown-ups could talk for a minute? Sam unplugged the umbilical cord on his pod. The pod blacked out, and the Odradek stopped moving. Projected into the air was a graph that showed the fluctuations in chiral density by time. This was the chiral density when the supercell appeared, but almost immediately after, it dropped back to normal levels, she explained. It was just like Mama said. The line on the graph dropped like a cliff face. In other words, the storm vanished in less than a second. Then, I was able to establish communications with you again straight after. Sam's shock must have been plastered all over his face, because Mama simply looked at him, shook her head, and then activated her cufflinks. Okay, let's pull the data from your cufflinks and take a look then. A new window opened, and the pandemonium of the battlefield was replayed for both to hear. At the same time, the 3D model that visualized the sound data was plotted against the time axis. Well, it's all pretty crazy, but at least you're not. Timestamps in the log supports your story. I wonder why there was such a difference. Best guess I can muster is you were trapped between two different space times. The lights in the lab flickered off for a second and then came back. The monitors were full of noise and the images became distorted. Just as I suspected, Mama muttered Mama. There's no doubt that the chiral density has become unstable. I still don't know whether that caused the supercell or whether the supercell is messing with the chiral density. Did you know that time doesn't flow on the beach? I'm thinking you were sucked up into a space-time that was very similar. Sam shook his head. He had never heard of a beach like the place he had just visited. Although, that's right, you're witnessing a supercell. It even says here that you were picked up by the storm. I've never heard of a beach encroaching on this world in such a way. If it wasn't the beach, then what was it? Sam asked. HQ is doing a deeper analysis of the data from your cufflinks. They should be able to figure out where you were sent. The sound of a baby crying echoed down from the ceiling. The lights flickered in unison. Sam was disconnected from his own BB, so he couldn't see it, but it sounded like the baby wanted something. She's been crying more at night. Mama was looking upward, a radiant look on her face. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, but it didn't seem like it was a reaction to chiralium. Otherwise, Sam would have been crying too. Chiral density increases in regions connected to the chiral network. Mama looked back toward Sam and wiped the tears off her cheek, but these numbers are way, way higher than I projected. A chill ran down Sam's spine, and the cupid that hung around his neck suddenly felt heavy. Am I doing more harm than good? I wanted to save Amelia and give the BB a life. I had to say yes to Bridges. I know I just turned a blind eye to all the deceit, but in doing that, have I just helped to build a bridge to the world of the dead? I've been concerned ever since the theory was disclosed and practical research got underway. Early on, Bridges did acknowledge this as a potential problem too, so I installed special limiters in the cupids to keep the chiral levels in check, even if we had to sacrifice some of the functionality to do so. None of this is tested, mind you. Are you saying if I keep extending the network, we might be in for more temporal phenomena? Sam asked. Maybe. Or worse, we cause another Death Stranding. In that case, they had to stop what they were doing right now. Sam felt for the cupid over his uniform. Was it just his imagination, or was it giving off heat? Sam knew that the easiest thing to do right now would be to give up on Amelia and the BB immediately. Just go back to being a normal porter. But he couldn't. Even if he could no longer rely on something as risky as the chiral network, he still needed to save her. He felt so frustrated at himself for not knowing another way. I still haven't tested this yet either. But I enhanced the limiter that suppresses rises in chiral density. Sure, it might impact the communication function a little, and we might not be able to recreate chiral computers and get back all the things from the past, because logically, it would mean we would have to consider a computational resource like the beach that is both timeless and infinite as something that still does have some limitations. We can only create so strong a connection through our network before the rising chiral density becomes unmanageable. But what's wrong with that? Even if we can't entirely let go of the past, there's no need to be imprisoned by it. Mama placed a small case on her desk and unlocked it. Inside was a cupid that looked exactly like the one that hung around Sam's neck. Will that fix everything? Sam reached his hand out, incredulously, but Mama stopped him. That one's not done yet. It seemed like Mama's hand was going to brush Sam's, but he managed to retract it in time. We need to rewrite the software to work with the new hardware, Mama explained. Well, then get to it, Sam told her bluntly. Mama had mostly been in agreement with Sam up to this point, but this time she stopped and shook her head feebly. Yeah, no can do. I designed the hardware, but the software was written by someone else. Her gaze seemed to go right through Sam and focus on something behind him. Sam turned to look over his shoulder, but all he found was a hastily reconstructed wall. Her name's Lochna. She was a member of Bridges 1. You'll have to head to Mountain Knot City, Mama told him. Mountain Knot City was farther out west than the lab. It was built within a mountain chain that ran from north to south. It depended on the cargo, equipment, and route, but according to records from Bridges 1, it took around 2 weeks to get there. All right, I gotta take the Cupid there anyway, Sam agreed. Oh, good. That's great. Mama's expression suddenly shifted like a shadow had been cast over it. Is there something about the Cupid repair that she isn't telling me? Maybe she's worried that something that worked perfectly on paper won't function as she intended in practice. Am I really supposed to continue my journey west as if nothing changed? The baby's cry broke the silence. The baby's cry broke the silence. They were exceptionally loud. So loud, in fact, that they made Sam feel worse, too. The lights that had been stable, the lights that had been stable until just a few seconds ago, the light that had been stable until just a few seconds ago began to flicker on and off. Mama rushed over and stretched out her arms toward the ceiling. Here we go again. I don't know what's gone into her lately, Mama said, waving her arms around. She looked like she was trying to die. She looked like she was trying to drive something away. All the lights went out and darkness descended on the lab. She's so scared. Look at her. Sam replaced the BB umbilical cord that he had disconnected and was able to make out baby's vague outline. He couldn't really tell if the baby looked frightened or not, but Sam's BB began to cry too, as if sympathizing with the fear. That's when Sam saw long, slender arms stretch into the room from the crack in the ceiling and tried to snatch the baby. Mama was trying to bat it away. Maybe the other side wants her back. Mama was dragging the baby toward herself on her tiptoes and held it close to her chest. Or maybe she wants to go back. The baby's small hands brushed Mama's cheek. The lights returned and the odor deck piped down. The menacing arm had vanished. We can't keep on like this. That much I know. Mama looked up at Sam, tears falling down her cheeks. As she stood there, clutching her specter of a child, she looked like the Madonna, the woman who resists the fate of her child to be taken away. She looked at Sam. It was like she was silently saying, "You know, don't you?" She was due. I was in the hospital, waiting for a C-section. Mama began to explain as she gently rubbed the baby's back. Okay, short. Everything had been going to plan. The conception went as normal. The baby grew like it was supposed to. Mama had found out that the child was a girl. People began to tell her that she was looking more like a mother. She had been a little embarrassed by all the attention, But she was happy. Someone had started calling her Mama, and it had stuck. Hardly anyone ever called her by her actual name, Milligan. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but I'll have to look up later. It was unusual for a child to be conceived in that colony, so everyone was delighted. She had decided to use a colony facility rather than one at a not city. She had decided to use a colony facility rather than one a, at a not city because she believed that her experience could provide useful data. There she was on the operating table. She was given general anesthesia and fell asleep. When she woke, she would be able to meet the baby. But all that awaited her when she awoke, but all that awaited her when she awoke was an unbearable pain that felt like her limbs were being torn off. She couldn't move at all. Even when she opened her eyes, it was still too dark to see anything. She couldn't remember where she was. Something was pressing down on her chest, and every breath left her lungs burning. She was lying upon the crushed operating table, pinned down by the fallen roof. What about the baby? All she could feel was a dull pain like rocks in her belly. She could hear the sounds of explosions in the distance and felt the tremor shake the building. She didn't even have the strength to ask who could have done such a thing. All she could do was weep. The tears that ran down her cheeks and into her mouth stayed. The tears that ran down her cheeks and into her mouth tasted salty. Even at a time like this, she could still taste. She was still alive. Mama once again tried to cry for help, but it was no use. She was struggling to even breathe. Her breath hung pale in the air. The sunlight that had shone down on her had disappeared. It was already nighttime. The chill that had crept upon her stole her body heat. She coughed violently and tasted rusted iron throughout her mouth. She couldn't breathe. Blood was filling her lungs and her world was going dark. It didn't matter if her eyes were open or closed. All she knew was that she couldn't let herself die there. Mama felt something fall on her cheek and opened her eyes to find droplets of rain trickling down irregularly. Then she heard a baby cry. "Where are you?" Her voice was so loud that she surprised even herself. "Where's my baby?" She could hear its voice, but she couldn't see it. Crushed by the rubble, she couldn't even turn her head. All she knew was that the baby, her daughter, was crying out for her mother. "I'm over here," she managed to shout out from the pit of her stomach. "I'm over here. Right here." But her daughter was nowhere to be found. Tired from screaming, Mama fell asleep. Then she opened her eyes and started all over again. She called out to the baby. She tried to comfort the baby. Sometimes she even sang to her. Each time she heard her baby cry back. Each cry told her that the baby was okay, and each cry also told her that she was still here too. It barely even registered when the rescue team arrived outside the building. Mama could barely feel anything anymore. It was like she had gotten used to the cold and the pain. The only sense that was still sharp was her hearing, so she could listen out for the cries of her baby. It sounded like it had begun to rain outside. It was the time fall. It had never fallen here before. Mama could hear shouts in the distance, beyond darkness. As she moved her head faintly, a light entered her vision. "Hello? Is anyone there?" Mama's voice was too weak to reach the rescuers, but her baby was crying so hard it sounded like it was screaming. "You're screaming for help. You're screaming for help for me too, aren't you? Even though you've only just been born. Even though I haven't done anything for you yet. I'm over here. Over here, please save me." The rubble was carefully removed from on top of Mama and her body was dragged out. The first thing she did with her blood-stained hands was reach for her belly. The blood mainly spread out from her abdomen. It was already black and dried. There was no pain in the now flat area. The baby cried. Thank you. The hands of the woman who was trying to fix an oxygen mask to her face stopped. She was wearing the red uniform of the bridge's medical team. Don't worry. Don't talk. You've been saved. Thank you. Excuse me. But Mama wasn't saying thank you to the woman on the medical team. Excuse me. But Mama wasn't saying thank you to the woman on the medical team. She was looking up toward the ceiling. Thank you for saving Mama. As a staff member equipped with a BB came over, their odor deck kicked into life and pointed upwards. That's my girl. That was how the BT baby in Mama's arm had come into this world. Or maybe she had never properly come into this world at all. An umbilical cord extended from Mama's belly. And we've been together ever since. But she's a BT. The ties that bind her to this place bind me too. You could say I've never really been discharged. This building had once been the hospital, but had now been repurposed into a lab inhabited solely by the mother and her dead daughter. And you're okay with that? Sam asked impulsively, but he soon regretted it. He didn't have the right to ask such a thing, but Mama just turned the question back on him. Come on, you of all people? Mama was looking at Sam's BB. Looks like it's sleeping. The BB's eyes were closed, and it was floating inside the pod. Mama rubbed cheeks with her daughter and opened her arms wide. The BT baby floated slowly upwards. Mama's umbilical cord followed, stretching along with it. It almost felt like both mother and daughter were ascending to heaven. So, you aren't the Virgin Mary trying to protect her infant. From its fate. I see. I just remembered. Dead man told me repatriates have special blood. Mind if I take a sample? Mama interrupted Sam's thinking with a deadly serious look. Your blood sends BTs back to the world of the dead. It was Mama who had created the weapons that had proved it. Those weapons were the reason why Sam's blood was always taken whenever he rested in the porter's private room, so it could be processed and turned into tools to protect him. Sam wondered what else she could possibly want to use it for. Mama ignored Sam's sigh and grabbed his arm. He tried reflexively to pull away, but it wasn't because of his aphenphosmophobia. It was because Mama's hand was surprisingly cold. Stay still. She restrained Sam's left wrist with one of her own cufflinks and pricked a vein with an ultrafine needle. I want to run a test. It could result in a weapon for you. Mama, are you... There, all done. Mama nodded. Sam had realized that while his breath frosted in the cold air, Mama's did not. I'm sorry, Sam. Would you mind leaving us alone for a while? You can rest here until the tests are done. You can contact headquarters or work on your equipment if you want. An area had been made up into a small private room. The bed that seemed to have been freshly printed from the chiral printer looked brand new. It also looked like some parts of the communications equipment had been upgraded to be compatible with the chiral network. But there wasn't a shower booth or an incubator booth for the BB to speak of. Mama didn't need either, so it couldn't be helped. When Sam thought about the distance between here and the mountain, not city, and the time it would take to get there, he worried about the condition of the baby. He wouldn't be able to connect the baby to its still mother and let it rest. I wonder what kind of bond the mother and this kid share. Sam had no memories of his birth mother. Neither Bridget nor Amelia had ever told him anything about her. But despite that, the existence of a mother lingered somewhere in his consciousness. He wondered if a fetus was part of the mother, or whether it became a separate person the moment that it began to grow inside her womb. Whatever the case, the mother was intertwined with her child. Once a child was born, the existence of a mother was essential to it. Mama grimaced because of the pain in her breast. Did the programming of a mother kick in whether the mother was alive or dead? Even if she was brain dead and they had no physical contact, the baby's mother still proved an environment, still provided, the baby's mother still provided an environment for her child. What divides a mother and her child? For Sam, who had never met his mother, that was a knot he would never be able to unravel. So, I can't leave. When Sam looked up, Amelia was standing there. Obviously, she was just a hologram, but her voice and movements didn't quite match. Edge Knot City was still impossibly far away, but even so, the time lag shouldn't have been this significant. Amelia. Amelia didn't respond to Sam's voice. Higgs and the others had finally arrived. Her arms were moving up and down awkwardly, like a badly operated marionette. She probably couldn't hear Sam's voice. It seemed like it was a one-way transmission. Excuse me. They reached all the way to Edge Knot City. I can't do anything. They've destroyed the city and killed everyone here. It didn't matter if they were with Bridges or not. Sam wondered if the separatists from before, who had taken her hostage and all but name, had been purged too. It looked like there would no longer be any room for negotiations once Sam reached his final destination. He would no longer be able to avoid the confrontation with Higgs. We're surrounded by BTs, but somehow I was still able to connect to you. Amelia's hologram vanished as if it were sand blowing away and didn't come back. All that was left was her voice. This might be the end. Everything had been going okay so far, but now I don't know what is going to happen. If you can connect us all up to here, Sam, then I can be free. I can go back east with you. A deafening noise filled the room and then suddenly vanished. The communications equipment had died. It was no longer emitting any sound at all. Amelia! He knew it was pointless, but Sam screamed into nothingness. Amelia didn't respond, and Sam grew anxious. Sam, I'm waiting for you. I'll be waiting for you on the beach. The voice hadn't been transmitted, but had reached Sam directly. Or maybe he was just hearing things. It seemed like everyone was trapped in one way or another. Sam, Mama, and now Amelia too. Excuse me as I yawn. Okay, another drink from Man, I feel like I should have gotten something with caffeine in it. Anyway, that's the caffeine isn't good for the voice. The monitor blacked out. The electricity to the lab had gone without warning, and the backup generator hadn't kicked in. Just before it happened, Mama had heard the sound of harsh static coming from the direction of the room Sam was staying in. The lab was plunged into darkness. Mama had been telling Sam all about the spikes in chiral density, but they were just a result of this phenomenon, not a cause. That much was clear. Sam must have realized that by now, too. Mama had no idea why the supercell had occurred. Mama had no idea why the supercell had occurred, or why Sam experienced what he did. Liar, you know something. But she did know one thing. She understood that the source of the weird phenomenon at the lab was herself. Mama had first seen the signs after Sam had crossed ground zero and had begun connecting sites west of Lake Knot City. The area covered by the chiral network spread out in 12 directions from each way station. The intensity varied, but it basically expanded con- concentrically. Concentrically. The intensity varied, but it basically expanded concentrically. Even if Sam wasn't in the area, his influence was gradually getting stronger and stronger. The farther west Sam traveled, the more he expanded the coverage of the network, and the closer he got, the worse her daughter's condition had become. It was a fact that the chiral network increased chiral density, and that increased closed the distance between their world and the world of the dead. They had been inching closer to the world where her daughter was meant to be. If she turned a blind eye to all of this, it would result in something that couldn't be undone. The first person who Mama contacted wasn't headquarters, but Lochna, an engineer in Mountain Knot City. There's a flaw in the Cupid, just like we feared. But just as she expected, no response to the text message had come. We have to fix the Cupid. I need you. Once again, there was no reply. It was the same outcome no matter how many times she sent a message. All her voice messages and hologram transmissions had been refused from the beginning. Even the headquarters seemed to have trouble making contact. Time was passing and she still couldn't connect with Lochna. You know, it'll never happen now, don't you? As Sam had steadily made his way over here, the chiral network had also come online. Mama's daughter started to cry more often. In front of Mama, there were two unfinished items. One was the new Cupid, and the other was a new cufflink. Neither item would have been possible if Sam had never reached the lab. That had been Mama's excuse for putting off her decision. But Sam had eventually arrived, and thanks to his blood, Mama had managed to complete. Why did you have to finish it? The new cufflink almost immediately. She had to choose, even though you've already decided. Mama took the cufflink in her hand. Her daughter was also asleep, so now was her chance. She would use the cufflink to send her daughter back. If she wasn't separated from her, then she wouldn't be able to repair the Cupid. She placed one hand on her belly and closed her eyes. Then she activated the cufflink and severed the link with her daughter. Nothing happened. Why not? There was a mistake in my theory. Was I just unable to do it? Mama looked closely at the umbilical cord connecting her to her daughter once again. She placed the cufflink on it and slowly began to cut. There was no physical pain, but she still felt like she was being stabbed in the heart. Again, nothing happened. It looked like her daughter had woken up. Light returned to the darkened lab. The fact that the communications equipment and all of the devices around the lab rebooted meant that the power had most likely been restored. And the text that Mama had been reading before the blackout was once again displayed on the monitor. Give me my daughter back. It was the last message. It was the last message sent to her by Lochna. When she heard the sound of a door sliding behind her, she quickly switched off the monitor. Sam entered the room. Did you get any rest? Mama asked. Sam just shook his head vaguely. Yes and no. He had equipped the pod to his chest and put his backpack on. He was ready to leave. Before you go, I have something I need to ask of you. Trying with all her might to suppress the tremble in her voice, Mama presented Sam with the brand new cufflink. They still work as a communication terminal, but I've added a weapon function. It uses your blood. The ring opened to expose a built-in dark gray cutter. The outer layer has been coated with metal fibers. These metal fibers are soaked in your blood, she explained. Sam took half a step back. He furrowed his brow as if he was looking at something that was too bright and bit his lip. He gripped both straps of his backpack. Excuse me, I'm yawning constantly now. BTs are connected to the other side via umbilical cords, right? When those cords bring the matter of our world into contact with the antimatter of theirs, boom, void out. But your blood has unique properties. It pushes back against the antimatter that makes up the BTs without causing a void out, so it can be used to cut a BT's cord. Mama didn't really need to reiterate anything to Sam. It was mostly for her benefit, for her to talk herself into what she was about to do. Mama sidled up to Sam as he turned away from the cufflink. Cut the cord of the BT and it returns to the world of the dead. No BT, no void out. Win-win. Right? Mama offered her breast to her unsettled daughter. Let's try them out. Cut the cord connecting us. Can't you do that yourself? A vein appeared on Sam's temple. Mama couldn't tell whether he was angry with her or if he had sympathy for her. All she could see was that Sam was trying to suppress whatever reaction he was experiencing. He knew about the relationship between her and her daughter. Mama tightened her arms as if trying to protect the baby that slept with its head buried against her chest. It made her hunch over. She must have looked so small right now. I'm sorry, she gets scared easily. I know that I'm being unfair. I've tried, but I couldn't do it. It's like I don't have the right to kill this little girl a second time. I tried cutting the umbilical cord by myself, but nothing happened. Mama's shoulders trembled as she continued to hold the baby. I can't leave this child's side, but I have to go to Mountain Knot City. Even if you go to Mountain Knot City alone, they'll never accept you. They refuse bridges. They refuse to join the UCA. But isn't that where this Lochna who's going to fix the Cupid lives? Lochna is my twin sister. She'll never forgive bridges. That's why I have to see her. And that's why I have to be separated from my daughter. You're the only one who can help me, Sam. Just listen. I'll explain about Lochna and I. Oh boy. I'm trying really hard not to fall asleep right now, so that's why I'm just taking every so often a drink of water and milk tea. Before we were even born, we were the same person in two bodies. In ancient times, two meteorites had struck the Earth simultaneously. The two craters were named Milligan and Lochna. Before we even came into this world, we talked to one another. Our counselor diagnosed it as a false memory that we had retroactively constructed, but to us it was real. It didn't matter how much we tried to explain it, they didn't understand us. Yes, but neither of us even had the words to describe it properly at the time either. We had memories from before we entered this world and left our own crater. In other words, we have memories from the time we were inside our mother's womb, conjoined twins. When we were born, we immediately underwent surgery to separate us, but we could still hear each other's thoughts and feelings. We had a telepathic twin connection. That sense of ours helped us to understand the concept of the chiral network. We exist before we are sent out into this world. As the past that the chiral network connects to. Being able to intuitively understand that, Lakna and I developed the Cupid. Then we went west with Bridges 1. And that's when tragedy struck. Lakna's lover died. It was after we crossed Ground Zero and reached Lake Knot City. We had just completed the South Knot City communication system via Middle Knot City. It wasn't anybody's fault. It wasn't an act of terror or anything. It was an accident. There were mountains of cargo containers, and one day they just fell. Lakna's lover got crushed underneath and died. Probably would have been better if it had been terrorism. At least with terrorists, you have someone to blame. We could have coped by hating the terrorists who were trying to get in the way of rebuilding America and pushed on forward. But we just couldn't stomach how he had died in such a senseless accident. We could have asked why for the rest of our lives, but we would never have gotten an answer. It just happened. Just like the rocks scattered across the wilderness. No rhyme or reason. We were told that we were in Bridges and the casualties were inevitable. We were reminded that we were tasked with the difficult job of rebuilding America and that we had to push forward and bear it. Lochner couldn't accept it and started to act funny. Why her? Why did she have to put up with just because? Why did she have to put up with just because she was a member of Bridges? Why were they even rebuilding America in the first place? She became trapped in a cage of unanswerable questions and decided to hang herself. I knew what she was planning to do. We were linked, so I was able to stop it, but I couldn't fill in the holes for her. I wasn't Lochna. Even if I could synchronize with her sadness, I couldn't carry her pain for her. That's why I proposed something to her. Somewhere in the depths of Mama's consciousness, she wondered if she was being completely honest. Was that the reason? I asked her if she would like to have a baby. It might have been a side effect of the surgery to separate us, but neither one of us was capable of conceiving children. Lakna had an issue with her womb, and my ovaries couldn't produce eggs. I had accepted it. I didn't particularly want children anyway, but the same couldn't be said for Lakna. She had fallen in love and wanted the man's child. That's why I suggested such a plan. I said we should have a baby so that her lover could still remain in this world. Every member of Bridges 1 was already obligated to donate eggs and sperm to secure genetic diversity for each knot city. So all I needed was her agreement. I decided to offer my womb as a surrogate for Lakna and became pregnant with her child. The artificial insemination went well, but everything fell apart once the hospital I had been admitted to for the birth was destroyed in a terrorist attack. The connection between myself and Lakna was severed. For some reason, we could no longer communicate as we had. But still, once I had been saved, I tried to contact her. I told her that I was okay, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her about the baby. I didn't even fully understand it myself. Is she alive? Is she dead? I needed time to get my head around it. In time, we grew farther and farther apart, and then eventually, Our relationship became irreparable. Give me my daughter. Give me back my daughter. Lochna demanded I give her back so many times, but I couldn't do anything. So I set a deadline for the day you reached here. Lochna withdrew from bridges of her own accord and became involved with the decision making of Mountain Knot City. She was instrumental to the development of the chiral network and the Cupid, and this engineer was well aware of the danger they posed. She was also welcomed by the people there. It really is, it really, but really, it was all because two twins had grown apart and no longer understood each other. It's stupid, isn't it? Yes, it is. Mama didn't need Sam's affirmation. She knew what a fool she had been. It could have been different if I had just told her the truth. We could have restored the link between us and understood one another. But I couldn't. I had fallen in love with this child. I had formed a loving bond with this child that had been inside my belly, and I wanted to keep her all to myself. I need to sever the love and the selfish attachment I feel to undo the knot. I need to return this little one back to the other side, see Lochna and tell her everything. Then we can repair the Cupid together and reconnect the world. I was the one who brought the world to a standstill. I need to put this right. Everything was because of me. So please, Sam, do it. Sam, Mama begged as she spread her arms and released her daughter. She floated gently upward as she dozed. Mama gripped the umbilical cord and showed it to Sam. She didn't know how much time had passed. She couldn't hear a single sound. All she could do was stare at Sam's pale breath. Sam connected the cord of the BB pod to his uniform, and all Mama could do was pray that he would take the cufflink. You aren't killing anyone. You're just setting this little one and I free. You're just setting this little one and I free, sending us on to the beyond. I tried to cut the cord myself, but I couldn't because I'm dead. That's my theory. I'm dead, can't send the dead can't send the dead to the other side. No matter how much I try to convince myself, I just can't erase my attachment to this world. If I could have, a BT wouldn't have been born. So please, Sam, I need a member of the living to cut the cord and undo this knot. Sam's BB became unsettled. It was like it had reacted to Mama's words about undoing the knot. It needn't have worried. She didn't mean that she was going to sever the connection between Sam and BB. The cutter that protruded from the cufflink glinted dully. Sam was getting closer. The umbilical cord that was formed of countless writhing particles, swayed up to the ceiling. Mama closed her eyes and a tear rained down her cheek. She couldn't help but tightly clenched her back teeth. She held her breath. Sam brought the cufflink down. The particles that had made up the umbilical cord broke free, began to disperse. There was a cry from the ceiling. The baby was no longer floating there. Now it was an adult BT with a soul and belly. It was Mama's true self. As the umbilical cord collapsed into nothing, the BT's form was outlined. The BT's form and outline began to fade and diffuse, and its cries could no longer be heard. Goodbye. She had finally said it. Mama's body collapsed like a marionette whose strings had been cut. She could no longer support herself lying in Sam's arms. Her body didn't trigger any of the usual symptoms of Sam's aphenphosmophobia. She didn't give off the warmth of a living person. All right, Sam, take me home to Lochna. Okay. Mountain Knot City. It was ever so sudden. Lochna felt something strange on her left cheek, like a lukewarm tear. She smelled something off. It was the reaction she had whenever the beach was near. It had been a while since the last time she had it. There had been no remarkable changes in the chiral density levels displayed by the monitor. Lochna had been monitoring the changes in density constantly ever since she heard that Bridges 2 had been dispatched from capital Knot City, and that the chiral network was finally being brought online. But she had observed significant changes in the eastern regions. It was just as she had feared. There was a fundamental flaws from the chiral network in the Cupid. It had always been clear that use of the beach as a communication route would allow its influence to grow stronger. The changes weren't something that she had stumbled across after combing finally through masses of data. They were so obvious that they were receiving reports from locals and readings from instruments that had been installed within nearby BT occupied territories. Together with her elder twin sister Milligan, Lochna had appealed for repairs to be made to the Cupid and for a reduction in the network scope. It all fallen on deaf ears. Di Hardman acted as the spokesperson for the will of the president, and he would not permit any changes to the plan. She had been half forced to head out with Amelia on Bridges 1, establishing infrastructure and organization throughout the scattered communities that lay across this land. Lochna and the others in the backup team had been tasked with completing and maintaining this infrastructure. Ongoing research and development and investigating the true nature of the Death Stranding. Along with the progress already made by Bridges 1, the increased militancy of the separatists and isolationists had only strengthened Bridges' resolve to rebuild America. Linking people together with the chiral network would help form an impenetrable fortress against threats. Together with the sharing of technology and information, the potential to manufacture any kind of equipment thanks to the activation of chiral printers, and most of all, their shared goals of rebuilding America, they would be able to stand up to anything, whether it was bands of terrorists or the Death Stranding itself. But all those claims by Bridges were nothing more than propaganda, all to bring the people together as one in opposition to a common enemy. A common enemy. It was stupid. Lochna couldn't help but blurt it out one day. Was it really necessary to go that far to activate the chiral network? Milligan had once complained about the same thing. What changed in her? When had they started to call her mama? The beach is linked to individuals. It's why all of our lives are so different, and why we all die alone when the time comes. However, although each beach is unique to the individual, they are all connected. This was what Milligan and Lochna wanted the chiral network to achieve for everyone else. Instead, it was being used as a tool to further the idea of rebuilding the UCA. This invention wasn't a toy. If Bridges absolutely had to use it, they could use it with restrictions. Once they had crossed Ground Zero and took over in the central regions of the land, the twins had once again urged their superiors to downgrade the Cupid and chiral network, but both headquarters and Amelia from the advanced team dismissed them. The infrastructure they had built was designed to work with the protocols that had been developed previously. They didn't even know whether the chiral network would activate properly in those conditions. That's why Bridges said they had to implement it with maximum functionality. Besides, they had already prepared a failsafe other than suppression by the Cupid. Even if the worst case scenario did happen, they still couldn't ensure the security of the Knot cities. There was a limited number of people who understood the entirety of the system, both because of its vastness and for security reasons. For all their talk about the importance of connections, bridges seem to keep a lot of secrets. Despite this, Lochna Milligan attempted to enact their own plan to repair the network in Cupid. Once they reached South Knot City, Lochna and Milligan requested to be stationed at an adjacent colony. It was home to a it was home to a collider that America had once developed. It wasn't working anymore, of course, but the enormous amounts of material left behind were irreplaceable. They could they could be used in the redevelopment of the Cupid. And perhaps more than anything, because the sisters, no, the three of us, including him, planned to have a child there via artificial insemination. But the two of them were not allowed to stay together. There were too few people as it was, and changes to the distribution of personnel were not permitted. Lochna was ordered to go to Mountain Knot City. It didn't matter though. The two of them had a connection, so they knew they would get through it. They could communicate between themselves using the beach of theirs, and they had both connected to they had both connected to while they were in their mother's womb. An overlap of our two separate beaches, like a miniature chiral network. Thanks to Milligan's devotion, Lucknow's wounds began to heal. She made a baby toy that looked like a large, old-fashioned thread spool, and it had it sent to Milligan. As baby grew in Milligan's body, Lochna felt as if it was growing in her own. She felt a kick. The two of them laughed and shared each other's happiness. Then tragedy struck. Although it hadn't been although it hadn't struck completely out of thin air, at least not for Lochna. As the birth of her daughter had neared, the bond between the baby and the mother had gone increasingly strong. Even if Milligan had just lent her womb, even if she still called it their baby, the only ones connected by the umbilical cord were Milligan and their unborn daughter. Lochna knew that she was jealous. She knew that it was an ugly feeling, but she couldn't help it. She hated the fact that people now called her sister Mama, and even worse, that Milligan liked it. When Lochna found out that Milligan, not Mama, had fallen victim to the terrorist attack in the colony, the first person she worried about was her daughter. Is she okay? Lochna sent the thought to Milligan. There was no reply. Milligan's beach was closed off. There had been worry that mother and child had been saved. Oh, wait, they're worried? There had been word that mother and child had been saved, but nothing from Milligan herself. Since she couldn't accept their telepathic link, I'm just making mistakes. Since she couldn't access their telepathic link, she tried the more conventional methods of communication: holograms, voice messages, text messages. Give me back my daughter. Nothing. At first, she only felt despair, but eventually, the level of hatred she had developed for her sister had grown to match it. As she was kept from the truth, it grew and grew. Her hatred for Bridges, who also hid information from her, grew too. That was the reason she first made contact with the group that self governed Mountain Knot City. Bridges had urged them to join the UCA, but in the end, they were granted a grace period until Bridges arrived with the Cupid to decide on whether they would join the chiral network in the UCA. Until then, people from Bridges were to be stationed at the distribution center that had been set up outside of town. But they were not to enter the town unless there were extraordinary circumstances. They were not to interfere internally. Those were the rules. Lochna left Bridges. It was never recognized officially, but she utilized her skills as a mechanic to remove her cuffs links herself. Then she made sure to tell the people of Mountain Knot City all about the dangers of the chiral network and eventually became involved in its decision making. That's what her defection was about on the surface, but underneath, she wanted revenge on Milligan and Bridges. If they were going to sever all contact, then she would too. It was some time after that Bridges disrupted the second expedition. It was made up of a single man, Sam Bridges. Tears continued to fall from her eyes. She knew it wasn't because she was sad. She felt a twinge of her abdomen that she hadn't felt in a long time. Are you close, Milligan? It all came flowing back. The stagnant timer that had been dammed up had been released and was now engulfing her. Her tears didn't stop. After that, her tears didn't stop. Okay. Trying not to fall asleep, blah, blah, blah. Excuse me. As Sam carried Mama, there was a change in her spirit. Are you all right? Sam asked, unable to look behind him. The softly falling snow had suddenly turned into a blizzard. The wind was blowing sideways and spraying them with powder. With every step Sam took forward, he would find his legs buried knee-deep in snow. After leaving Mama's lab, it didn't take too long for the scenery to completely change. The ground was no longer flat, but packed with steep slopes and mountains. Once they went a little farther, all the ground was covered in snow. The temperature had also dropped dramatically, and the snow combined with the rockiness of the area made for terrible footing. Sam kept walking, but it was as if he was making no headway at all. His suit was made with heat insulating material, and his boots had been treated to be resistant to the cold. The relentless weather still froze him to the core. He had already lost the feeling in his toes with their missing nails. If he kept this up, he would be risking frostbite. But his biggest concern was Mama. When they had first departed, she wouldn't stop talking about Lochna and her daughter, but she had grown steadily more silent. Maybe the cold was making her sleepy, or she was getting weaker, or maybe that Sam had a bad feeling. Maybe the cold was making her sleepy, or she was getting weaker. Or maybe what Sam had a bad feeling was going to. And maybe what Sam had a bad feeling was going to happen now that she was separated from her daughter was indeed about to happen. It was all just speculation. But Sam suspected that even in this cold and snow, her breath would not hang in the air like his. He only wished he could turn his head to check. He felt like Mama's body had suddenly become lighter. I'm fine, Sam. Her voice was small, but it didn't seem like she was in any pain. I just thought I heard Lochna's voice. Mountain Knot City was just over the summit of this mountain. Hey, Sam. Lochna has gone closer, all thanks to you. The blizzard became even stronger, and Sam could barely make out what Mama was saying. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Lochna. Mountain Knot City. Milligan was almost here. the sister Lochna so despised yet yearned for. All of a sudden, their beaches resonated and their link was brought back to life. Several scenes unfolded at once like a panorama. The hospital roof collapsed and Milligan was pinned underneath. Her belly was being crushed and the baby died before it was even born. My baby. Our baby. She was rescued, but she couldn't leave the hospital. Lochna watched as Milligan tried every means possible to contact her. The same thing happened to me, Milligan. I wanted to talk to you, but I couldn't connect. Give me back my daughter. That was the only message that had reached Milligan. The only message that had reached her twin sister was one of her most hate-filled. Even though Mama had been unable to leave the building, she had still attempted to repair the Cupid. She had thought of a way to leave her daughter behind and acted upon it just to see Lochna again. She had used Sam's blood to cut their umbilical cord herself, failing again and again. Then she had Sam sever it for her and bring her here. So, it was like that. Yes, like that. We hadn't been broken apart. We were still connected by the same beach. We had just gotten lost and missed each other. Lochna ran. She ran out of her room, ran down the basement hallway, and aimed straight for the bridge's distribution center. Waiting for the elevator to reach the upper levels frustrated her immensely, and she immediately tumbled out to the doors as soon as they opened. A porter was stood next to the activated delivery terminal. The snow that covered his head and shoulders was melting and dripping to the ground. Sam Porter Bridges had carried her sister Milligan, Mama, all the way here. Milligan! I'm finally here, Lochna. Sam laid Milligan down on the stretcher that the staff had run out with. Bundled up inside the delivery bag with her eyes closed, Milligan looked like some kind of chrysalis. She was smiling faintly. I'm sorry, Milligan. Lochna put her head to Milligan's. A black tear fell from Milligan's left eye as another black tear fell from Lochna's right. Forgive me, Milligan. I'm sorry that I never had the guts to tell you, Lochna. Lochna threw her arms around Milligan. Milligan presented something to Lochna, gripping it tightly in her trembling hands. It was a toy Lochna had sent her while their link was still open, all that time ago. I'm sorry that I couldn't protect your child. It's okay, Milligan. You don't need to apologize anymore. Lochna wiped her cheeks, which were now mottled with black tears, and took Milligan's hands into hers. Looking content, Milligan switched her gaze to Sam. Sam offered the one other piece of cargo he had brought along to Lochna. Please fix the Cupid. Milligan's breathing was shallow. Please don't talk anymore. Lochna, you need to fix his Cupid. I couldn't save our child, but you can save our world. Only you. I love you. You hear me? Milligan pleaded. I love you too. Milligan mustered all her strength to take her final breath before her eyelids began to slowly close. The toy fell out of her hand and onto the floor, where it clattered all the way to Lochna's feet. She felt like she could hear their daughter laughing as it rolled across the floor. Milligan had finally been set free from this world. Lochna made contact with Sam in his private room. She had already finished fixing the Cupid. She had worked pretty fast. It was still only a few hours since Sam had first arrived. Sam entered the room she had instructed him to come to, which also doubled as Lochna's lab and private quarters. In contrast to Mama's preferred look of a white tank top and work pants, Lochna wore a blue cap with a hood that wrapped all the way around her. Mama's body was lying on the simple bed up against the wall. She had a peaceful expression on her face and looked like she would wake up at any second. Lakna took the cupid in her hand and raised it up in Mama's direction like an offering. I fixed it, just like you asked me to. Her tone indicated that she wasn't speaking to Sam but to Mama. It's okay now. This should help us to suppress the chiral density. Sam looked up. Surprised I fixed it so quickly? The hardware had already been repaired to the specifications that Milligan and I were looking at before, so all that was left to do was check the code and assemble it. Sam took the new cupid and hung it around his neck. These twins may have disagreed, but they were looking in the same direction, headed for the same destination. She died beneath the rubble with our child still inside her. Her ka passed over to the other side, but her ha remained, bound to our dead daughter. Lakna was leaning over Mama, softly caressing her cheek. She knew all this, of course. Lakna looked over at Sam to see if he knew what she was talking about. That's why she kept one cuff loose. Didn't want anyone seeing her vitals. Shame she couldn't use her favorite invention. Lakna released the single connected cuff link. Lakna released the single connected cuff link from Mama's right hand. She did all that to keep me and our daughter safe, even if it was all quite clumsily orchestrated. A tear fell from Lakna's left eye and dripped down onto Mama's right cheek. It made Mama look like she was crying too. Right. Let's go. I've spoken to the Mountain Knot City Executive Committee. We will join the UCA. Now you go and use that cupid to bring us online. Lakna left the room and they headed to the upper floor. Stood in front of the activation terminal, Sam showed Lakna the cupid in his hand. This was a new knot, created by the twins. He held the metal shards up to the receiver. Lakna held her breath and looked at him. The scent of the beach permeated his nose, together with the usual feeling of floating that Sam experienced, and tears began to fall from his eyes. But it was different to his usual reaction. He was also crying because of the overlying warmth of Mama and Lakna. We're whole again. We're one, Lakna murmured almost in song. She crossed her arms before cupping her left cheek with her right hand and her right cheek with her left hand. Her eyes were now two different colors, one blue and one green. Like before, in the womb. Yes, I remember. Lakna Milligan spoke alternately. All Sam could do was watch. He knew that he would never forget this moment. He wondered how many times he would think back to it, back to the moment when Milligan's ka returned to Lakna's ha. Thank you, Sam. We're whole again. He would never forget such a beautiful union. Lakna and Milligan may have lost their daughter, but they were free from their knot. And now they had made a brand new one. Oh boy. Okay. Looks like we're doing chapter 7. Hold on. This is the last chat or episode. I keep calling it chapters, but they call it episodes in this. Of Volume 1, this should be the last one. Oh, the red bean. Water. It's weird. I suddenly feel very awake, and I guess sadness just wakes me up, which is a very odd thing to say now that I say that out loud. But either way, episode 7, Dead Man. Sam looked at the BB pod connected to the incubator. He was finally able to let the BB recover in his private room, now that he had brought Mountain Knot City online. She died beneath the rubble with our child still inside her. Her ka passed over to the other side, but her ha remained bound to our dead daughter. Sam remembered what Lochna had said. Her daughter was a child who died without getting the chance to live. It was the same as his baby, killed in her mother's womb. Lochna and Milligan's baby had been stuck between life and death, just like this baby that they used to sense the other side. They were keeping this one alive. Its ability was why Deadman had entrusted it to Sam, to keep him safe, as Deadman clung to the vague hope that Sam might discover some kind of breakthrough during his journey across the continent. But was this child alive in the first place? The BB let out a little cry. Both of its hands were pressed against the window of the pod like it wanted something. The BB's hands began to crumble. The BB's arms disintegrated into particles next, followed by its chest and then its legs, just like Mama's baby had done. As soon as Sam made a grab for the pod, its glass window shattered. Both the pod and the BB had vanished. Sam screamed and tried to get up. He was breathing so hard that his shoulders were heaving. He was still sat on the bed. It looked like he'd fallen asleep. Realizing that it had all been a dream, Sam looked over at the pod in the incubator, but the entire pod was gone. "Ooh," Sam shouted, getting up for real this time. "Looking for this?" Man's voice inquired behind him. A barrel of a man wearing a red leather jacket entered Sam's vision. It was Deadman. He was holding the pod in one of his arms. Sam had wanted to keep Lou's name to himself, but it was too late now. Unable to find the words to gloss the situation over, Sam simply glared at Deadman. "Surprise! Fragile worked me here. I finally got to visit the beach. Well, her beach." Deadman sat down on the bed. It looked like bridges were ignoring the concept of privacy once again. Sam's right hand cufflink suddenly felt very heavy. Sorry, I'm trying to. Okay. Oh boy. Sam's right hand cufflink suddenly felt very heavy around his wrist. Someone had mistaken the concept of connection for stalking. "Your beloved BB has a serious issue," Deadman sighed wearily. He was probably worn out from the jump he had just made across the beach. Bridge babies are quite literally bridges between this world and the other side. Their place is not here with us, nor with the BTs over there. They belong precisely in between, with no greater affinity for one world or the other. But BB-28 here has been leaning farther and farther toward the world of the living. Toward you, Sam. That's because we're partners, Sam interjected quickly, but he wavered. The dream of his BB turning to dust crossed his mind again. Partners? Sam, a BB is a tool, not a human being. Bridge, yes. Baby, no. The sweat on Deadman's brow accentuated the long scar that ran across it. This man was anxious. Sam couldn't tell what had prompted the man to come here, but it seemed urgent. So tell me what the problem is. This tool, this weapon, is transforming into a living being. Deadman wiped away the sweat on his forehead and looked into the pod. It's gaining weight. Its brain activity is increasing. It's accumulating memories. BB-28 is becoming self-aware, becoming an actual child. Doesn't sound like a problem to me, Sam commented. It's hardware, Sam. Manufactured for a purpose it cannot fulfill outside the pod. The pod is made to feel like the womb of the BB still mother. They come as a package. There is a 70% risk of catastrophic failure simply in removing it. which hardly matters, because at this point, it'll cease functioning within a couple of days. Deadman gently returned the pod to the incubator. The private room they were in was located in Mountain Knot City, which had just been brought onto the chiral network. If that was the case, then shouldn't the BB have been able to relieve some stress by reconnecting with its still mother back in? If that was the case, then shouldn't the BB have been able to relieve some stress by reconnecting with its still mother back east in Capital Knot City? I know what you're thinking, Sam, but I told you, the BB is growing. At this rate, it's going to outgrow the pod, so we have to reset it. Deadman wiped away at the sweat on his forehead with the back of his hand. You'll have to leave it with me, of course. Otherwise, the kid's done for. Deadman had referred to the BB as the kid. That's right. Deadman also wanted to keep BB alive. Maybe it only seemed like Deadman didn't care. Deadman paced slowly along the walls. He was looking around the room with interest. I'll cut the cord that links the two of you, and then perform an operation that reconnects it to the other side. Think of it as a little tug to correct its alignment, to put it back where it belongs, right between the world of the living and the dead. It'll be reborn as a new piece of equipment, restored, but like I said, you'll have to be without it for a while. You sure this will work? Sam asked. Of course. One catch, though. The surgery may erase its memories. The man's gaze left Sam and wandered toward the ceiling. Erase? Will forget about me? Sam cried in disbelief. Relax. The BB will still function as intended. In fact, we'll be able to optimize the BB's resources. Sam had no words. Deadman also shut his mouth and the room fell silent. Deadman had stopped in front of the shower booth. All of a sudden, he began to remove his jacket and undo the bursting buttons on his shirt. Can I borrow this? I'm covered in sweat and chiralium from my trip across the beach. Deadman winked as he asked. What the hell was he talking about? Thought he'd be glad of the chance to hang out with the dead. Sam shook his head, not revealing his confusion. Hey, come on. I know that you're worried about the BB, but what about me? Are you worried about Amelia? Deadman's eyes weren't smiling. He was being serious. His gaze flitted between the ceiling, the walls, the equipment shelf, the incubator, the terminal, and all the small items dotted around the room before finally it returned to Sam. Sam sighed. Fine. He got up and headed to the shower booth. The man fiddled with his cufflinks and released Sam's. The warm water made a loud noise as it gushed out and cleansed the man's body. Sam's underwear clung to him, as did Deadman's shirt. Deadman pushed his sodden hair out of his face and turned to Sam. No one can spy on us in here. It's just you and me. No audio records of what we say. No video for lip reading analysis. Get closer. Sam understood, but he couldn't stop the reaction from his aphenphosmophobia. Die-hard men cannot know of this. Understood? There's more you should know. It's about the original Bridge Baby experiments. Was this what Deadman had jumped all the way to tell Sam? Did that mean that everything about Lou's condition was just a cover story to pull the wool over the director's eyes? A faint glimmer of hope sparked in Sam's chest. Piecing together what little I could find, it looks like they were conducted on the island of Manhattan off the East Coast, which was completely and utterly obliterated by what was almost certainly a void out. I should also mention that the president himself was killed in the blast. It was after his death, when he was succeeded by then Vice President Strand, that the experiments were suspended by executive decree. Documents were shredded, facilities were decommissioned, and every effort was made to pretend that the BBs had never even existed. The man inched even closer. He leaned right into Sam's ear so that his lips couldn't be read and dropped his voice. But the experiments continued in secret. His words were drowned out by the sound of the water. He was doing everything in his power to avoid any interference from headquarters, or rather, the director. On the direct orders of President Strand. Bridget? Sam gasped loudly. The man clapped a meaty hand to his face. They weren't designed just to be BT detectors. The BBs are essential to solving the mystery of the Death Stranding. Bridge babies are the only bridges that we have to keep us alive from one day to the next. She wanted to incorporate them into the chiral network, to facilitate travel to the beach, but none of her plans ever came to fruition. In the end, it was only ever people like you and Fragile who were afflicted with dooms, who could sense BTs and use the beach. That's why Bridges were so enthusiastic about having people like you in their ranks. It took a while, but in the end, they managed to organize an expedition to reconnect America and a team to head west. Meanwhile, BB Tech fell into Tara's hands. What's Die Hartman's part in this? Sam asked. I'm afraid to find out. I don't know how long he was working for Strand. I don't even know his real name or his face. I thought you might, since you two go farther back. He was already wearing the mask when I met him. Something about burning his face. Sam shook his head to indicate that he didn't know any more than that. Was Bridges different from how it was 10 years ago? Or had Sam just been naive about the organization's dark side and contradictions back then? Right, sorry. Any data we have from back then is classified at the highest level. As far as I know, the director is the only one with clearance. But the chiral network presents a new opportunity. By compiling fragmented data in the public domain from all across the country, I might be able to piece together a little more of the puzzle, Deadman posed. Maybe he would end up piecing together something even darker than the origins of the BBs. The thought chilled Sam to the bone and made the steamy waters of the shower feel even more blistering. Be careful, Sam. They're watching. Deadman stopped the shower and exited the booth. Sam followed. By the time he got out, Deadman already had the pod in his arms. Look after Lou for me. Sam bowed his dripping wet head a little. Deadman gave him a thumbs up to show that he understood. It looked like all the stuff about the BB had been true. It hadn't just been a cover story like Sam hoped. The BB was going to be reset and its memories erased. The BB would probably forget him. But when he thought about the kid, it was probably for the best. He couldn't just monopolize the kid's life because of sentiment or ego. That's what he told himself. Sam, I'll have him back to you before you know it. You get on with connecting up the chiral network like you have been doing in the meantime. There's no time to rest for porters like you. Deadman winked and began to head upstairs. Sam was worried about Amelia. Deadman was right. He didn't have time to rest. Hartman's lab is up ahead. A number of scientific staff from Bridges, like evolutionary biologists, paleontologists, and geologists, are working on an excavation in the shelters around it. Excavation? What kind of excavation? Sam asked. Isn't it obvious? They're searching for clues to help unravel the mystery of the Death Stranding. We need you to deliver some cargo to them and get them up on the chiral network. That should help us get a good look at the events of the past, and we'll be able to dig up any buried research results. Die Hartman wants you on that, too. Got it? Deadman waved himself out with one hand and held the pod in the other. It seemed like he wanted Sam to act as if the doubts that he now had about the director, Bridges, and even Bridget didn't even exist. Sam could see it as Dead Man walked away. Sam could see it as Dead Man walked away. Once again in his private room, Sam looked at the empty space where the pod had once been connected to the incubator. He felt like the emptiness. He felt like the he felt like the emptiness was swallowing him up. It wasn't simply a matter of Lou being gone. Sam felt like all the darkness that Bridges was hiding was completely overwhelming him. Okay. And there we go. That was the end of volume 1 and some random blank pages in this book. Interesting. Okay. Okay. So yeah, that was volume 1 of Death Stranding, the novelization of Death Stranding. Now, oopsie, boy, I do have volume 2 here. Excuse me, I just have a look at my timing. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm gonna say this right now. I am gonna start volume 2, but it is gonna be interrupted at some point because I am going on a vacation in January. So at some point you're gonna have a 3-week delay. Can 3 week? Yeah, around 3 weeks delay in when I between when I stop reading and when I can continue reading. So I think there's like sections where I have to do a 2-parter for a particular chapter or so. Either way, yeah, so interesting. I'm going to read this again, nice reminder of what happened in the first game. And I'm very curious about I was not expecting I wasn't expecting there from what I remember. I vaguely remember from watching Let's Plays is that the story kind of I thought neatly wrapped up in the first game. So the fact that there's going to be a sequel is actually pretty interesting to me. Especially there's some details watching that teaser trailer where I'm like, okay, interesting. Um which so yeah, I'm kind of curious what the story for the second game is going to be. But either way, that's it that was the end of volume 1. So next week, unless I'm super tired, we are going to be starting volume 2. So thank you for liking if you liked. Thank you for commenting if you commented. Thank you for subscribing if you subscribed. Thank you for favoriting if you favorited. Thank you for simply clicking on this video. Until next time, guys, see you as we end the stream. Goodbye.